Disclaimer. The videos are purely for educational purposes. The intention is to guide the students to fare well in their term and examinations of their professional courses. I will not be contacting any of the subscribers or followers with messages regarding private tutoring or any money transactions. If anybody does message you, please report them and block them immediately. Professor K.M channel will not be responsible for the actions by the imposters with the same name.
Welcome to my channel. I am Professor K.M. Mahadevappa, academic counselor of MBA in Indira Gandhi National Open University. Today, for the benefit of the students, I have taken one of the specialization subjects of human resource management, the course being MMPH 004, Industrial and Employment Relations. The current students are required to answer the assignments of this particular subject, and out of 5 questions, I have chosen one of them and I have compiled around 800 words so that students can repeatedly go through that and try to memorize to an optimal level of 600 to 700 words, such that they will be able to recall at the time of term and examination and be able to write between 600 to 700 words to fetch maximum marks. And as far as the assignments are concerned, they are supposed to write, and 30% of the marks obtained in the assignment will be added to the term and examination, where the marks obtained in the term and examination will be cumulated to 70% of the marks obtained, and marks obtained in assignment and the term and examination will be added to declare the result of that particular course. Now, I am just going through the question and answer of the assignment. Now, briefly explain the feature of collective bargaining, how this method is different in the public sector. Collective bargaining in India, procedure and types. Collective bargaining is a term used to describe the procedure whereby the employers must attempt to reach an agreement regarding terms and employment and the working conditions of labor with the trade unions instead of with individual workers. Collective bargaining is a process of discussion and negotiation between an employer and a trade union, culminating in a written agreement and the of problems arising under the Supreme Court of India has defined the process of collective bargaining as a technique by which dispute as to conditions of employment is resolved amicably by agreement rather than coercion. Workers who are generally represented by a trade union use this medium to express their grievance about various issues such as wages and working conditions. Procedure for initiating collective bargaining. First one is a charter of demands. The trade union will notify the employer for initiating collective bargaining negotiations. The representatives of the trade union draft a charter of which contains issues related to terms of employment and the working conditions, namely wages and allowances, bonuses, working hours, benefits, holidays. In some cases, an employer may also notify the trade union and initiate collective bargaining negotiations. Second one is negotiations. Negotiation is the next step after the submission of the Charter of Demands by the trade union. Both the employer and the employees seek opportunities to suggest compromise solutions in their favor until an agreement is reached. If it is impossible to reach out to an agreement, a third party, that is a mediator or an arbitrator, may be brought in from outside. If even with the assistance of the third party, no viable solution can be found to resolve the parties' differences, the trade union may decide to engage in strikes, or even it can also seek the intervention of the government authorities, statutory authorities like labor commissioners of labor department of the corresponding government. The third one is the collective bargaining agreement. Pursuant to the negotiations between the parties, a collective bargaining agreement will be executed between the employer and the workman represented by trade unions, setting out the terms of employment and the working conditions of labor. The strikes, if both parties fail to reach an agreement because of mutual consensus, the union may go on a strike which shall be in accordance with the provisions of the Industrial Disputes Act 1947 and the rules thereunder. The fifth one is conciliation. Once the conciliation officer receives a notice of strike or lockout, the conciliation proceedings shall commence, and the state government may appoint a conciliation officer or a board of conciliation to investigate disputes, mediate, and promote a settlement. Workers or employees are prohibited from going on strike during the pendency of such conciliation proceedings. Conciliation proceedings may have one of the three outcomes, namely a settlement or a no settlement, or a reference being made to the appropriate labor court or any other industrial tribunal. Sixth one is compulsory arbitration or adjudication. When conciliation and mediation fail, parties may either resort to compulsory or voluntary arbitration. Arbitration and the recommendations of the arbitrator may be binding to the parties. Section 7A of the ID Act provides for a labor court or an industrial tribunal within the state to adjudicate protracted industrial disputes such as strikes and lockouts. Section 7B of the ID Act provides for constitution of national tribunals to resolve disputes involving questions of national interest or issues concerning more than two states. In the event a labor dispute is not resolved by conciliation and mediation, the employer and the workers or the employees may refer the case by a written agreement to a labor court or industrial tribunal or a national tribunal for adjudication or compulsory arbitration. The following types of collective bargaining agreements are prevalent in India. Bipartite agreements. These agreements are a result of voluntary negotiations between the employer and the trade unions and are binding as per the provisions of the ID Act. Settlements. It is tripartite in nature as it involves employer, trade union, and the conciliation officer from the government concerned, and the settlements arise out of specific disputes which are resolved by a conciliation officer. If during the conciliation proceedings, the conciliation officer believes at any point of time that there is a possibility of reaching a settlement, then the officer may withdraw himself from the negotiations. The parties are free to finalize the terms of the agreement and must inform the conciliation officer within a specified time frame if such an agreement is reached after his withdrawal. Consent awards. These are agreements reached while a dispute is pending before an adjudicatory authority. Such agreement is incorporated in the authority award, and although the agreement is reached voluntarily between parties, it becomes binding under the award passed by the authority. The conclusion of the entire collective bargaining. Refusal by the employer to bargain collectively in a good faith is an unfair labor practice as per ID Act. Collective bargaining agreements between the trade union and the employers are enforceable under Section 18 of the ID Act. For a successful process of collective bargaining, it must begin with proposals rather than demands, and the parties should be ready to negotiate and compromise. The process of collective bargaining enables healthy discussions between the employees and the employers and facilitate the growth of industrial relations. Having said that, collective bargaining by trade unions often tend to be an arm-twisting exercise given the political affiliation of trade unions in India, and it is more about the show of strength by the trade unions as opposed to a good faith effort to negotiate genuine demands of workers. With this, the answer for the assignment is over. The students are requested to ensure that they compile at least 700 to 800 words per question and prepare themselves for the term and examination, so that by repeatedly going through the answers that are made by them, they will be able to optimally have in their memory around 600 to 700 words to fetch maximum marks to get distinction by adding both the assignment and termed examination marks. All the best. Thank you.